Hi everyone, and welcome to Cyber Safety Guy Roundup. It's been quite a while, and I realised that I'm really rubbish at doing these. So I've stopped calling them monthly catch-ups and started calling them the Roundup. But it would make sense for me to kick off this one with my return post because, as most of you know, back in June I decided to take some time off from blogging and all those related activities because they do trigger me from time to time. Obviously, I've mentioned that it's something that I feel is worthwhile, and I do accept that on the majority of occasions. But it was starting to affect me in a lot of ways in my day-to-day life and my work life and my home life. So I took a break, and I'm really happy I did because I've come back refreshed. I came back and started blogging again in August, and during my time off I actually came up with an idea which I'll go into in one of the updates. But yeah, my first post back was back in August, and that was me returning from the sabbatical, and you can read that on the blog, and you'll see it up on the screen at the minute as well. That was the return. So there's been a couple of blog posts since then. One of the ideas that I actually had whilst I was taking that time off was to create some presentations, and they are available on my YouTube channel, but also I've hosted them on my Google Drive so that they can be downloaded as well to be presented in an offline environment. And there was three separate presentations that I created, and basically they are designed to be able to give to groups of people. So the first one is actually for a guide for parents, teachers, guardians, anyone who has a duty of care over children, any sort of youth organisations, air cadets, scouts, cubs, that sort of thing. And it's very much pinpointed towards those individual groups, and it gives some good advice for, especially on the first one for teachers. It gives them advice on how to deal with those subjects that are probably quite difficult for them to broach in a normal conversation, and it gives some good tips on how to have that conversation with children. It also highlights some of the risks and dangers that are in that online environment, and I think it's really useful for giving that broad presentation to those particular groups. So the first one is, as I say, for parents, teachers, guardians, people in a duty of care position. The second one was for a guide for children up to the age of 13, and that's designed for children to watch it. So if you want to, give it to a group of children or class, or on a cadet night or that sort of thing, that's what it's designed for. And the last one is a guide for teens who are 13 plus. The other thing was that I kept them sort of about 30 minutes long because I know the attention span of children is probably about as useful as my attention span. It's like a goldfish. So I tried to keep it short, but I'm also offering my time to any organisations or groups that would like me to do like a remote presentation. And the reason for that is that I think that the power of these presentations can sometimes be actually in the questions and answers that occur afterwards, because the presentation will spark up some questions, and I always like to be able to answer questions, and think that it's very useful to be able to do that, because if you have a question, it means you don't know something, and if you don't know something, that means there's a gap in the knowledge that a predator could use to their advantage. So I'm always happy to do that. You just need to reach out to me via the blog, and my contact details are on there. The next post after that I did, or after those series of posts that I did about the presentations, was about stress to strength, and it was about helping children to navigate life's pressures, because we all deal with stress. I may have letters that say that I have CPTSD, but and it's an extreme form of stress and anxiety and trauma, but everybody will experience stress in their life from one extent to another, because it's a natural human reaction to work deadlines, to bills, to packed schedules, But children experience stress too, this and anxiety, because they have pressures at school of exams or challenges with their friends, and they encounter many different stresses throughout their daily routines and daily lives, and it would be bad of us to belittle those stresses because we've experienced life and we know that maybe certain events that happen during school and stuff like that, they aren't the biggest to us. They aren't the biggest thing in the world. But if we try and remember back to when we were children, to us in that moment, they were, life ruining, and that's what we need to try and understand. You can't prevent stress entirely. We might like to think we could, but all we can do is equip children with the tools to manage stress effectively, and they're tools that I wish I'd had as a kid, but they're also tools that I wish I'd had when I started doing the role that ultimately broke me, because it's those tools that allow you to cope with it, to sort it out, to deal with it, to move past it. And I think that there's just some really good information in that blog post about what you should be looking out for: physical symptoms, emotional, behavioral changes, that sort of thing. But also then talks about how to create a safe space to talk to the child, and then to encourage those proactive and relaxing activities, which I go into in the post. And I think that it basically all comes down to maintaining a routine and planning ahead, and then knowing that you've given them those tools to be able to cope is a big thing. It also goes into about when you should seek professional help, because for me, professional help was ultimately what helped me to turn around and to be able to operate on a day-to-day basis and to be able to do things like this. So you may get to the stage where just helping them out with information isn't enough, and you as parents or people in a duty of care position are in the best position to know that, because you know the child, you know how they normally are, and you know when it gets to that extreme level of having to speak to doctors and get people in to assess things. So definitely worth a read for that one. Then after that, I did a blog post called The Digital Wild West. And I think what I wanted to express in that one in particular was that, as I've mentioned in the past, the digital world is so ingrained, so deeply integrated into children's lives, that online harms can be just as devastating to a child as those that are faced in the physical world. The internet obviously is a great place for connections, for learning, for those sort of opportunities, and I would never detract from that. I just highlight the fact that there are also a lot of risks on there, and the scale of those risks is becoming greater. There's a few statistics in the post, but mainly I use statistics to show that the risks are real. They're not just made up risks. And I think that a statistic is also something we should realize is an actual child. It's something I've said in many posts and many videos before, is that I do this so that your child doesn't become a statistic. And I genuinely mean that. I don't want children being a stat, because every time I read those stats, I don't see numbers. I see children from my previous job, and you don't want them to become a statistic that someone like me remembers. So I would love if all these statistics were zero, because that would be the ideal world. I know that that's not going to happen, but what I can do is ensure that you realize the risks and know how to sort of inform children around them so that they can be better protected and better warned. And it does go into what some of those online harms are, such as pornography. Promoting self-harm and suicide is a big one that hopefully the online safety bill is cracking down on, but it will always be something that exists on the dark web and places like that, and children will know how to find them. So you need to forewarn them so that you at least give them a chance of realizing in their own heads that it's not safe. Dangerous challenges and violence and stuff, all these viral challenges that have ended up killing people, that sort of stuff they need to know about. And then there's the hate and abuse that happens on a regular basis online, which seeps into normal mainline social media. The risks are all on there. Grooming, exploitation, it's one that we're all aware of. Children need to be aware of it. There's also privacy and data risks that goes into the releasing of their information, and also just releasing stuff onto the internet that they're going to regret in 20 years from now when an employer goes looking for their social footprint. It's going to give you some advice on when you need to step up, where that protection gap is, and the circumvention, of tools and controls. You may use parental controls, but a technical control is just that. If a kid knows how to get round it, then they're going to get round it. So you need to couple these things as a defense in depth type scenario. You need to couple them with other things such as communication and that ability for them to be able to approach you when something's not right. Underage access, every social media platform is supposedly 13 plus. I know for a fact that there's many children under the age of 13 that are on there, and that comes down to parental control and parental access. And if you're giving your child permission to go on there under the age of 13, you need to accept that responsibility and understand the risks that go with allowing them to go on there. And then there's children concealing harm. I think the stats for that one on the blog post speak for themselves. The reason they're concealing it is probably because they don't feel like they can come and speak to a trusted adult or a parent or a guardian about things. And that's why my go-to every time on these things is communication is key. You need to be non-judgmental. You need to be open to them, and you need to let them know that you just want to protect them. I think that one pretty much covers that blog post. Please do read it. It's worth a read for the stats alone. And then the last one I'm going to talk about on the roundup today is From TikTok to Crisis. And I think I spend a lot of time talking to you about keeping children safe online and why that's important to understand those risks. But as somebody whose future's ultimately been shaped by a life-changing mental health condition, I think it would be remiss of me not to spend time talking about the effects that the online world can have on the mental health of children. And digital platforms are at the core of this, because it's a core element of their lives. And the stats reveal that there's severe and escalating crisis, and we're placing an unprecedented strain on young people, but also the support services that exist across the UK for children's mental health. And again, stats are quite heavy in this one because stats represent a person. They represent an individual, and they represent an individual who's suffering a mental health crisis because of the online world. So I thought it would be good to talk about how it's a double-edged sword. The online world, as I said previously, is great, but as with everything that has a positive purpose or is created for a positive purpose, someone out there will turn it to a negative purpose. And that's no different from the online world. There's lots of reasons why children shouldn't be allowed to use the internet, but we can't let that stop us from allowing them to have access to the positive sides. Consequences of waiting and not dealing with mental health in the interim. I'm a really good use case for why you should deal with it early and not leave it and not pretend it doesn't exist, because the damage that gets done is hugely impactful, not just to the person, but also to the people around that person. So there's some more stats in there about mental health reports, getting worse, because the strain on the system means that they're having to wait longer. So the earlier you can get that intervention, the better. Yeah, and just from my perspective, the goal should be not to rely solely on technical controls to filter out content, because it's just not, it's not going to be possible. You need to foster that culture of resilient, resilient digital citizens, and ensure that children have that timely access to mental health support before the crisis occurs. There's some tips there about how to look into that, how to encourage safe self-referral, how to address online harms and that kind of thing, and just some resources that are available to you as parents, guardians, and people with a duty of care. There's some resources there of how to get more information, but also how to access further professional care for children. And that's the last blog post I'm going to talk about. But I haven't done, you'll notice that this roundup didn't have any cool pictures of Leffy, because I haven't been doing virtual pet therapies. I'm not sure if they're coming across, if they're actually, we're actually being enjoyed by everyone. Just because I enjoy loads of pictures of Leffy and because he brings massive smiles to my face doesn't obviously mean that it's doing the same for everyone out there. So if it's something you'd like to see back, drop a chat on the blog, drop me an email, whatever, let me know, and I will reinstigate the wee man and plenty of photos of him. But if you would rather it just stays to these sort of posts and advice and information and risks when they appear, then I can do that for sure. Hopefully you have enjoyed the blog posts that I've been putting out there. Do share them across your social medias, because I'm not a big user of social media, because it is the devil's spawn to me. But if you found it useful, do get it out there, do propagate it for me, and let's build a community where people come to help each other and to protect children. Thanks very much.